Good morning. This morning we are going to take apart the iPhone 4S. As you can see right here, we managed to get our hands on one and we're unboxing it as we speak. Overall, looks almost identical to the first iPhone 4. The antenna bands are obviously different. It has the SIM card tray on there. Everything else just looks nice and clean about it. Same 30-pin dot connector. It looks like this one is a model A1387, indicating the iPhone 4S. It looks like they've incorporated the Pentalobe screws in the bottom to take this apart. So in order to get that started, you'll want to use a Pentalobe screwdriver. You can pick these up at our website, powerbookmedic.com. And that's all there is to taking those screws off. Then the back case should just slide forward and come off. You see there's still the plastic on this because we've not even turned this phone on. We're just going to take it apart. So it slides forward. The back case looks like it has some different shielding inside, which is kind of nice. Maybe it'll make it a little bit more sturdy, not crack as often. We replace a lot of back glasses with repairs here. You notice the layout here. There are several Emi Shields, one over here, one over here. Overall, the layout is very, very similar to the iPhone 4, the CDMA version that Verizon uses. So we're just going to go ahead and start with removing the battery. In order to remove the battery, it looks like you're going to have two screws that hold an Emi Shield over the battery connector, and we'll go from there. These screws look like they are just standard Phillips head screws. So use our Phillips 0 to take these out. You want to make sure to keep your screws separate if you can, so that way you can remember where they go when you put them back together. And hopefully, in this video, we will be putting this back together and turning it on and showing you that everything is working. I'm going to use my metal spudger to lift this up. I would not recommend this for everybody. If you've never taken an iPhone apart, this is probably not the way to start out. I can't encourage you enough to seek professional help when you're doing these repairs, because if you damage something, you're out a chunk of change. There's a small Emi shield that goes over top of the connector for the battery. You'll notice that behind the battery cable is an antenna cable. I believe this is for the GSM antenna. If this isn't plugged in, or maybe the CDMA, if it's not plugged in, you will not have signal when you fire the phone up. And then to remove the battery itself, we just wedge your tool in behind the edge of it, because that little pull sticker right here will just tear if you pull it. If your battery starts to flex a little bit, it feels kind of like clay, it's okay. These batteries are called lithium polymer batteries. It's a redesign that Apple's been using for the last several generations of phones and on some of the newer MacBook Pros. They are pliable. You just don't want to tear the seals on them. This one also has, it looks like it's rated a little bit higher as far as the capacity goes than the original. So now that we've gotten this out, we're going to take out this Emi shield here. It covers the dot connector cable. Again, just a Phillips number 0. Now one thing I noticed is that the Emi shields on these are silver as opposed to the black, like they were powder coated before, I guess. Makes for a prettier look inside the phone, but nothing else too spectacular. It looks like the water sensor sticker has gotten to be a big triangular shaped form instead of the original dots that they used to use. It used to be a dot over this screw right here. So we're going to lift this out. Again, I'm using just the edge of my pry tool so as not to damage any pins underneath. You need to be very, very, very careful when you're doing these things. Now that this is pulled out, you're going to see that the Vibrator Assembly is the rotating oscillating style assembly. for the vibrator, as opposed to the type they used to use up in the corner with the old GSM phones. Again, fantastic design. You'll also notice right here, there's one of these screws. I don't have a good name for it, but there's actually a screw hole set inside of the top of this screw. You'll probably have one or two more of these throughout the layout of this phone. For that, you'll need a flathead screwdriver to take out. I'm going to go ahead and remove a couple of more screws here in the lower half of this and continue on with the disassembly. Now, as we're sitting here taking this phone apart, people might ask, why are you doing that? Well, it's kind of simple. We here at PowerBook Medic are a lot of fans of Apple products, and we love to work on things and take things apart and see how things work. We also like to fix things when people have accidents, and we know sometimes it's just not cost effective to go out and replace something if you drop it. So we like to provide an alternative solution for people to take care of certain repairs, which is it's what we do. It's one of those things that you have to have a passion for, or it's just not going to be something you're going to enjoy. So I've unhooked this cable here, and I'm going to go ahead and take out the dock assembly or the speaker assembly screws on either side, and I should be able to just lift that speaker assembly out. You'll notice on top of the speaker assembly on the left hand side there's going to be a small triangular piece of plastic. It's really basically just a spacer. It just allows for the flush fit of everything inside of the phone. So, I don't know if you'll be able to see that very well or not, but that's a little spacer, don't want to lose that. And this just lifts out and comes out. And again, just like the previous design, it's got the small teeth along the edge that fits under the edge of the LCD bracket. On this one, it's just a speaker assembly. There's nothing else attached to it. And it looks like the next thing to remove here is going to be the screws for the Emi Shield. We've got 1, possibly 2, 3, 4, 5 screws. Under here I suspect there's probably 4 or 5 ribbon connectors, and probably of course your LCD and digitizer cable under here. And I'm just going to start taking more screws out. Again, these are all going to be Phillips 0. Now, with the GSM iPhone, there are a number of different size screws, and I do my best to try and keep these screws in order so that way I can put them back in the way I got them out. With the CDMA, there were just 2 or 3 different types of screws instead of like 5 or 6. It looks like on the iPhone 4S, it looks like there's probably about 3 or 4 different types of screws. But overall, it looks like they tried to make them as uniform as they could, which should make taking apart and reassembly a little bit easier. There's another screw over here in the corner, and I'm not exactly sure what this is yet, but I suspect it has to do with being a cable guide, possibly, or it actually holds the headphone board in, is what it looks like it is. Your headphone board is right here. Looks like there's a bracket here that's holding this corner of the headphone board secured into place. That's my best guess. We'll see here in just a few minutes. In this video, I am probably not going to take the headphone jack out or the proximity sensor out because those are very easy cables to tear. I will point out where they are. They run right here over to your mute switch or your camera buttons or volume buttons, whatever you'd like to call them. And then there's another cable that's going to run here under this Emi Shield. Let's go ahead and take this Emi Shield off. Again, using metal spudger just to lift gently. We'll see what we've got. With these shields, you'll notice that they've got a little bit of a hook here, so it grasps onto where it needs to sit as it's in there. Alright, so underneath we've got the new 8 megapixel camera right here. We have LCD and digitizer cables right here. We have probably one of these is going to be your proximity sensor. It looks like this long one here is going to be your headphone jack. And my suspicion is the third one under here is probably going to be a front-facing camera. Let's go ahead and pop some cables off and see what happens. Again, you want to be very, very gentle when you're lifting these cables up so as not to damage them or any of the connections underneath. Because if you do that, you're going to end up probably needing a whole new logic board. The 8 megapixel camera and the flash are here. Notice that there's not an arm on these like there were on the earlier iPhones, iPhone 4s. Let's see. This one I believe is a headphone board. Yep. Looks like this one, this cable right here comes down, routes around here, and comes up. So my money is this is your rear facing or your front facing camera right there. And then this is going to be your proximity sensor probably. The proximity sensor cable is probably going to run from the hold switch at the top, power button, over to the sensor that picks up whether your ear is near the phone or not. And my understanding is that the proximity sensor may also trigger Siri to work, which is probably the most spectacular feature on this new phone. So it looks like everything is more or less clear here. Let's see if we can lift this board out. Well, we forgot the most important part. SIM card tray. Normally I would say use a SIM tool. Pentalobe screwdriver is small enough that it will fit in the hole. Pressure that out. We'll remove the SIM card tray with, of course, a standard AT&T SIM card in there, as this is the GSM version. And let's lift this board and see what happens. So I'm feeling a little bit of hold there, so there's something else holding this in place. Looks like there's another shield right here. Let's see what it is. Looks like there's something with adhesive. I'm not going to peel that. There's another antenna related to Emi Shield. Again, don't know how well you can see this, but hopefully pretty well. And the second of those screws I was telling you about that take the flat head, but they have a screw hole recessed inside of them. I guess I should probably learn what the proper name of that is. Notice that this one is considerably longer than the first one we took out. So you should be able to see, hopefully, this is the one that goes on the top, this is the one that goes lower. And it looks like there is one more cable to loosen right here. Release that. And it's just a BNC connector, it's just a little antenna connection there. And it looks like everything is set to come out now. Almost. What are we missing? Looks like there's a sticker in the top corner here. I wonder if that's attached to anything. I'll gently scrape that up a little bit. Use some tweezers and peel that back and see what's underneath. Ah, a hidden screw. Very nice. So, it looks like there's a hidden screw here. We'll get that taken care of. On that screw is also another small connector. I'm going to keep that separate. Third try. Let's see if the board comes out this time. And it does, very, very nicely. There are heat shields over top of some of the chips here. This is, of course, using the new A5 chip. It's using an 800 megahertz version as opposed to the 1 gigahertz version. It's a dual core, very similar to what's found in the iPad 2. All right. Now, all that's left are a couple of cables up here, and your vibrator assembly, and your dock connector. For this video, I'm going to go ahead and remove the display. The display is going to be held in place with, it looks like, 6 screws, one behind the vibrator assembly, and there's going to be 3 on each side, and there's going to be screws in each corner. Now, previous reviews that I've read of this phone said that this display is very similar to the GSM one. I say yes in the placement of some of these screws because they made room for the SIM tray. But the big difference for me with the GSM and the CDMA displays is that the CDMA have these corner tabs set evenly on all the corners. On the GSM, they're offset on the upper corners. So it's sort of a combination of the two displays before. Doesn't look like it's going to be interchangeable with previous generation iPhone 4 displays. Looks like the 4S is going to be a brand new thing. Generally, the vibrator assembly is just held in by adhesive. So I'm going to put my flat spudger tool there and lift up. And there you go. Nice and simple. 2 little spring contacts on it. Shouldn't have any issues with it breaking or failing. Now let's loosen some screws and get this display off. You notice that the screws on the side, I'm only turning about 1.5 turns because there's a washer underneath these, and I don't see any need to remove them as I'm just loosening these so the display will slide out. Notice that the frame of the display, you'll notice when it's taken out, will have teeth that slide on either side of those washers. You'll have 4 small Phillips head screws in the corners that secure the display in the corners. Looks like in this corner there is again some tape, which has to be pulled out of the way. Okay, screws are loose, screws are out. Now we just have to remove the display. This is the part you're going to want to be very, very careful about. I recommend using a flat spudge tool. Hopefully you won't be removing this display unless your display is already cracked. You have to be careful because with using metal, you can scrape the paint off of the back. I'm going to do my very best not to mark it or mar it. I'm going to start at the corners and just try and wedge just a little bit underneath. Traditionally on these mid-frame boards, under here and here, there's adhesive helping to hold the phone in place. So I just want to work my way gently and pry up. I don't know if you can hear that popping sound, but it's the sound of the adhesive loosening as it comes across. So I'm going to work my way up and just pry a little bit. Okay. Looks like the display is loose. You're going to have these 2 cables that are going to fit through the mid-frame. They have to be pulled out gently so as not to tear anything. And it looks like I've got some adhesive holding it. And we are free. Now, one big difference on this display. the home button is held right here. Home button is held right here by adhesive. So it all comes as one part of the display. I suspect that these will have to be changed over when we replace displays on these. Okay. And everything else is here and here. So let's go ahead and get this put back together and see if we can get this thing fired up. With these digitizer cables, there's going to be a little loop here. You want to make sure not to get jammed in the phone as you're putting it through. You want to make sure it sits in there properly. You want to line all of your screw holes up. This phone just sits together just beautifully. Now we're going to tighten all these screws back in place and put her back together. It's basically just a reverse of what I've done before. Okay, we'll put the 4 corner screws in place. See, take a small strip of adhesive, put it back in place where it was. And the back in there. Time to put the logic board back in. You may notice there's a little rubber gasket here. I'm not recording anymore on this. So notice that there's the bumper on the top of the logic board here. It has to go back in place. I'll make sure not to get anything trapped underneath it. Make sure everything's sitting where it's supposed to sit. Cables, bumpers, everything. When they line up right, everything literally just sits in place. Of course, if I don't have this, there we go. If I have all my cables out of the way, it won't sit there right. Now, we will take the screw that goes up here in the corner and set it in place. We'll put our small screw here with its little guide. Looks like it's a grounding guide for the camera. Notice I use very, very small magnets on my screws, my screwdrivers. So they don't create enough of a field to cause any kind of damage to anything. However, it does allow me to get a grip on these screws when I need to. Now, I'm going to replace the adhesive that went over that screw. which looks like it's set right here. And fold it down. I push my antenna back in place. I'm going to start reconnecting my cables. So all those are fastened securely back in place. Digitizer LCD secured back in place. I'm going to put this antenna cover back here where it belongs. Slide it in. Grab the screw for that. I should grab the correct screw for it though. That's the important part. I'm going to put the camera back in place. Sits in there snugly. And should fasten right in place. Emi Shield. Again, good to go. These smaller screws that you have, I'm going to go here right next to the camera, and then below it. The longer screw will go in the top, center, and the thickest of those screws is going to go on the left-hand side, holding the logic board in place. Not too shabby. It's a nice little design. I'm going to put the speaker assembly back in place. I want to be careful about the teeth not to get those broken. I guess it's a good thing to follow in life. They're sitting in the right place here. I'll take this. Oh, we missed something. It's time to loosen this logic board up and put the vibrator assembly back in place. Let's see what we got here. Dot connector up. Vibrator assembly needs to line up with this bottom screw hole on the logic board. I'm going to slide it in place. Just a little bit there. And it's in. Nice and simple. Couldn't ask for anything easier or nicer than that. So now, dock assembly back in place, teeth where they're supposed to be. Put the screws back in where they go. I'm going to slide this triangular piece in place where it goes, along with the screw to hold it down. The antenna has to be snapped in place. That is important. Okay. I've got a couple more screws to put in. And we'll buckle this up and see what happens. The screw that has the riser in it goes in the bottom corner, just like where I took it out. Now we've got all that put in place. We're going to lay this dot connector cable in place, secure it. And we're ready to put the last EMI shields in and put the battery back in place. So make sure to peel this tab up if you used adhesive to hold it in place. Put this tab up and out of the way. We're going to slide the battery cable so it's folded properly in place. And put the small battery shield. And basically all it does is cover that connection for the antenna, preventing interference from coming into the antenna. You have to use tweezers to put it right back, lay it back in place where it needs to go. And then we're going to close the battery over top of it. This is a little bit trickier than it was on the earlier versions, but still not too bad. Once you've got it there in place, should be able to snap it in. Looks like it's good. Put the last two screws that hold the battery in place. Okay, it's a double speak. Looks like everything's secure where it goes. Final EMI shield over the dot connector cable. Notice these screws, there's one that's got a thicker head. It's going to go on the inside. And one that's got kind of a flattened head is going to go on the outside. I'm going to insert the SIM card tray, slide it in place, put the back case back on. I'm going to fire it up to make sure that it's working before I put the last two screws in place. And there you have it, Apple logo working. Let's see what we got here. There we go. Pentalobe screws go on the bottom. And how beautiful is that? And that, my friends, is the end of our iPhone 4S take-apart guide. For these videos and 100 others, just showing you how to take apart a variety of different things, feel free to visit us at powerbookmedic.com. If there's anything you need, just give us a call. It's 1-866-726-3342. powerbookmedic.com.